Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Cop Car. Cop Car is a minimalist genre exercise that kind of mixes genres between having a cat and mouse chase action movie, a fun kids get a big adult world type of trouble movie, and a morality play also, and mixes them all together in this smaller pace indie style. And I have to say I kind of like all that about it. I think it works really well within that. But it has such a simple plot. It's just two kids find a cop car when they're running away from home, and they realize that there's no cops in it and that the door is open. And they get in and drive away with it and drive around, and the cop whose cop car it is has to go and find them before it's too late, because he's not a good cop. He's an evil cop played by Kevin Bacon, and he has something notorious in the trunk and he doesn't want them to find out, so he's searching for these boys who stole his cop car. This film kind of reminds me a bit of Kelly Reichardt and what she did with her film Night Moves, which was a movie that was considered for her kind of her more mainstream kind of Hollywood type of movie, and she kind of took the framework of a film like Rafifi. And when you're picking a film like Rafifi, you're picking from the cream of the crop in terms of heist films. And Cop Car kind of takes from a lot of B-er genres, and it takes from a lot of crappier genres. And it's not taking from a specific film like Night Moves was, but it reminds me of that combination of her style, which I can see a lot of Kelly Reichardt kind of style in John Watts' direction. That slowness to it, that letting things play out, like we just slowly watch the cop car come in, we watch them just drive around and hang out, we really let them have character moments. It's very sparse in what it's trying to do. But it's also, this is very much a Hollywood construct. It's like, oh, what will these two kids do without any adults, because adults are gross and stupid. It's like the whole idea of Home Alone almost. But this film has real stakes. This isn't a kid's movie. This is a premise to a kid's movie, but not played out in a kid movie way. These kids are living in the real world. There are real consequences. Real bad things can happen to them. That's an interesting turn to what it's doing, and I think it shows what John Watts is doing with this film is he's doing something different with it. It's almost like you really thought about what would happen in one of those premises that you saw from like a kid's movie when a bunch of kids had to fight an adult somehow, and most of the time it'd be wacky and be like, I'd get you kids, and the trailer for this movie would be like, these kids steal a cop car on a collision course to wackiness. This film's wacky with the kids, and it has a real sense of childlike wonder to what they're experiencing. And the two actors, James Freedson-Jackson, who plays Travis, and Hayes Wilford, who plays Harrison, I don't think they're phenomenal kid actors. I think they're directed well and it works really well for them. But what he does with the premise is what's interesting, and influencing it through this kind of B-movie, almost like dirty cop genre world. It combines a lot of those things but does it in a minimalist way. But it's not like what Walter Hill or John Carpenter would do, where they take a genre idea and break it down in a very deconstructionist way. This isn't really saying anything about those genres necessarily. I don't think it's really saying anything politically or anything like that. I think it's just kind of an exercise, but an exercise that's not necessarily saying anything, and I don't know if that's entirely necessary. It's the kind of film where it makes you kind of think about how the story is playing out and how smart of a storyteller or director can be, that they can play a story like this as well as it plays out. Minimalist kind of films, when they're nailed well, really show off the direction, and I can see that with what John Watts did in this film. There's certain information that we don't necessarily know all of. We know Kevin Bacon's character is a dirty cop. We don't know the specifics of it. We know he's killed people. We know that he has drugs, but like, how did he get those drugs? Was he just busting people and selling them on the side? Is money involved? Like, why is he killing these people? We just see glimpses of it, and as much as we know information, we only know what we need to know. And I think a lot of storytellers nowadays, and a lot of directors and screenwriters, and he actually wrote this with Christopher Ford, who also wrote Robot and Frank, we don't need to know the whole dealings with Kevin Bacon as a dirty cop. We don't need to know an exact history. That's not important. And there's a character like Cameron Manheim, who we don't really understand what her backstory, and there's certain things you could probably go into that or something, but that seems to be very boring to me. I wouldn't want that, and I kind of found that refreshing, to be honest, because I really hate when we go into, in so many movies, like, let's over-explain these things, because everybody acts like that's really smart, but in actuality it's really stupid, because when you over-explain something, I ultimately find it kind of insulting. It's like you didn't have the confidence in your storytelling, or you didn't have the confidence in the audience that we could understand this. And this film has a lot of confidence in its audience. The interesting thing is that this film seems to go more into its Hollywood elements. Specifically, like, the kids are little Hollywood. There's a part where they're driving with the cop car, and the cop car flies up in the air when they hit a hill, and it was like, oh, okay, alright, I get it. And there's like a couple moments where I was like, this is a little too Hollywood, which I wish they hadn't done. I wish they'd kind of stayed within the spirit of the movie. When it would break like that, it really hurt it a lot. It might feel like a premise of a Nickelodeon movie, but it eventually goes more into like this bad cop genre, be kind of direct-to-video 90s or late 80s movie, which seems to be interesting. I notice when a lot of directors nowadays are doing more genre pieces, they feel a lot like the late 80s. The late 80s, how we all wish they had gone, looking at the early 80s filmmaking. Sometimes I think we think about how that evolution could have gone, and it feels like maybe people are doing kind of revisionist history in a lot of ways, like The Guest, certainly. I like Kevin Bacon a lot. He doesn't talk a lot. The kids talk a lot more than him, and the kids actually have great dialogue. I love when they're cursing at the beginning. If you remember when you, with your friends, talking about how many curse words you knew, and kid logic, and they're like, do you know how to drive a car? And I go, yeah, I played Mario Kart, and like dumb kid logic stuff, or how you know about like hiding, and like you could be in the army or something just because you've seen a bunch of like G.I. Joe episodes. But like, how many times when you were 8 did you sit around with a friend and go like, I totally know how to camouflage, my grandpa told me. I love their confidence. It's such a kid confidence, and they play it off so well. It really reminded me of being a kid and hanging out with my friends when I was like 8. Back to Kevin Bacon. But Kevin Bacon, he kind of plays it almost comically. He takes his uniform shirt off when he leaves the car there to bury this body, and when he runs with these skinny arms, it feels like he's playing it up, but in a way like some embarrassed cop in your neighborhood is running and like doesn't want you to know that things are going wrong, and he plays it very well. I like Kevin Bacon quite a bit, actually. It seems like most of the time I see him, he's rather good. He's one of those actors who always knows the kind of movie he's in. Sometimes he knows it better than any other actor in the scene. It is kind of very much a movie star character, and he eats it up, but he eats it up in a character actor way. He's an interesting actor because I think the reason he's lasted so long is he understands how to take roles more like a character actor than a movie star, and this is a great example of that. One of the things about this movie is we know that this guy is going to do the next Spider-Man movie. And this happened before this movie had been released. I kind of wish this film had gotten to come out for a month or something and get its reputation. But I really have not read a review without it mentioning the Spider-Man thing. And I kind of dislike that because I think it's an interesting film. But he's a lot more promising and a different kind of director than I've seen do one of these things. The fact that it is more slower paced and it's more simpler and isn't too convoluted or complicated, like whatsoever. I don't think this you could ever remark that Cop Car is convoluted and complicated. The problems with this film is that it's almost too into these B kind of genre things, and it doesn't break out and say anything more than those films do. It does kind of the basic Hollywood thing, he just does it in a more interesting way. This film is a lot like Shaun the Sheep. It might seem like a leap, but it's more about how good the execution is rather than the story itself. The story itself isn't actually that remarkable, and it's combining genres, and that's surely interesting, but how this is directed is really the showcase of it. How this is directed is really why this movie is good. You could think of like the Ebert thing where he'd say, well, it's not what a film's about, it's how it is about it. And in that case, I think this film's good. But I still want to look at the story, and I think the story of it isn't exceptional, but it is like a better directed kind of B movie than it should be. I like that the poster is very much like a B kind of film. It feels like something you'd see on VHS back in the day. It just like looks like something that would be playing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on syndicated TV, but directed in a more indie kind of slower paced, more letting the characters play out kind of way, letting you sit with these moments a little more. And that to me is probably what makes Cop Car worthwhile, but it's taking something that really isn't that great of a story and making you sit with it a little more. And sure, that's interesting, and sure, I think that's a good movie. When I think of other films like this, like The Driver by Walter Hill, like a lot of what Carpenter did, I don't think this says as much about genre and is as suspenseful, because that was a comment on genre. Driver is like, let's take this film down to its basic elements. And Cop Car is a different kind of a story, but you don't get that intense, like, deconstructed feeling from it. You just get, oh, this is a film directed in a more arty, kind of patient way. And sure, maybe I'm overanalyzing it and mentioning the faults, but it does make me think about, well, why did you do this? And I don't think there's a point to which that makes sense why they did that. Shaun the Sheep did that because they're trying to do something with animation, really say something in a silent kind of a way. And that's breaking things down to kind of almost silent animation, what you actually need to tell a story, in the same way the Driver did. And Cop Car isn't doing that for basically any reason, it's just a style they picked for it. And that certainly works for it, but when you end it, I kind of felt like that was really good, but I almost felt like empty by it. And I think that still works really well, and maybe I'm being too analytical with it. At the end of the day, I think when you're doing a film like that, and the reason you're doing something, maybe I feel like it should be saying a little more than, oh, these kids get a cop car and the morality that plays within it. I think certainly it's saying something morally, but what it's trying to do with like genre and kind of twisting things, it's not really saying too much with it, just putting it in a realistic world in an indie way. And that is interesting, but I don't think it exactly has a point to it. It's more of an interesting idea executed very well. And it says a lot about the director. I don't necessarily think it says a lot about him as a screenwriter, but he directed the hell out of his screenplay. Because there's very few directors that could direct a screenplay and direct a story in this fashion. I think that's why when you watch Cop Car, you're talking about the director, because you're just like taken aback by someone can do this in this kind of a way and direct it this well and take a very Hollywood thing and do it in a very more patient way and economical. And I think that's what's so interesting about it. It's kind of like stylish direction masking itself as meaning. I still found myself liking the film and liking the pacing and liking that kind of masked thoughtfulness. I think it's interesting enough to see a different kind of genre exercise succeed in the way it does, even if it isn't really saying very much at all other than being a genre exercise. So if you have seen Cop Car and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.